That kind of thinking that you're describing would go a long way to getting the divisiveness in this country to narrow, to bring people to a willingness to start talking to people that have a different position on some of these core issues right now. Because right now, we're seeing people that disagree with us as the enemy. Not just somebody that disagrees with us, but the enemy. And enemies are people that we see as attacking us, taking advantage of us, doing bad things to us. And there's no way you can do that unless you see yourself as being under attack. I think it's terrible that we've gotten to the point where we really do see anybody that disagrees with us as an enemy. And I know people say, oh, this is the worst it's ever been in America. They forget about the Civil War. It seemed like things got a little bit worse then. I was around when we had the demonstrations against Vietnam, and I think we were as close to this country melting down then probably as we've ever been. So there have been other times, and we seem to have come out the other side of that, maybe better, at least okay. But I don't know that we've put on our victim hats and painted our counterparts as enemy as much as we do now. I think what you're saying is really important to say, let's talk this through. Let's really share. And it goes back to what we started talking about. We need stronger people where we don't have to feel so threatened every step of the way.
And there's a greater tragedy, Dr. Phil. I'm glad you mentioned the Civil War. There's another spiritual principle. When I talk about spiritual and moral law, Jesus says this: a house divided against itself, it won't stand. And at some point, we have to recognize that the division in our nation will eventually become an irreversible problem, a greater problem that now we're talking about the essence of our nation now can implode. I'm talking about our nation can literally implode if we don't get a grip on the division that's taking place. And zero victim thinking neutralizes that so that we can at least be civil and respectful and intelligent about our discourse to respond by reason to these challenges. I have no doubt in my mind that we are sensible and intelligent enough to solve every problem we're dealing with in America. I don't believe that we're some kind of specimens in a test lab to just react to whatever happens in life. God created us in his image to be very intelligent. I think we're more than capable of solving the issues that we need to in life. But again, there's such an emotional, visceral reaction that's being monetized, weaponized, politicized. Who's gaining from the division in our society? That's another question that has to be asked. But I think there's no question at all that we can address these issues if we can ever sit down from a zero victim perspective.
You used to be able to have a debate and then walk off the Senate floor and go have lunch with your adversary and come back. And the comment I get now is, well, if it's all the same to you, I don't want to go have lunch with a baby killer. Well, okay, I understand, but let's find maybe a place to start. Yeah. We don't have to go there on the first sandwich. Let's find a place to at least treat each other with dignity and respect.
Sure.
And maybe we can find something that we can both live with. Here's why I think what you're talking about, particularly from a spiritual standpoint, and I know you're being careful to not hit that too hard. I don't think you're apologizing for it, but I think you don't want to exclude anyone. If somebody is not a Christian, which I am, and I don't apologize for either, but if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, don't let that turn you off, because the lessons here are applicable whatever your belief system is. When I think about this, let me put my psychology hat on for a minute. And the it I'm talking about is Pastor James Ward's book, Zero Victim, Overcoming Injustice with a New Attitude. That sounds like a shameless plug. It is. It's the third or fourth one I've done because I'm a big believer in his mindset and his book. It is well written. It's a page turner. It's authentic. He's lived it. He does live it. It's not some theoretical treatise. It's very readable and understandable. But looking at this from a psychological standpoint, if we look at violence, for example, you go into a neighborhood in Chicago, LA, New York, or whatever, and they'll say, well, they're violent neighborhoods. You can identify neighborhoods where the violence is located, but research tells us that within that neighborhood, there are locations within a neighborhood where most of the violence is centered. You can go into a few city blocks and you can find portions of blocks where there are micro locations, and you can identify sometimes what you can count on both hands where the perpetrators for 80 or 90% of the violence are among bad actors you can count on both hands. It might be 6, 8, 10 people in a micro-focused area within a neighborhood. That means if the right people, the police officers, the social workers, the parole officers, the probation officers, can get this mentality and sit down with those young men, and they are men, and they are young, and they are identifiable. We know who they are. We know who's doing what they're doing. And get this across to them that they do have a choice and that it's them that needs to take off the glasses that see the world in this way. Significant changes can be made with a relatively small number of people in every community.
That's correct.
Because we know who they are, we know where they are, and you're talking about a mindset they need to embrace. And if they will, then the whole tenor of the neighborhood can change.
Yeah.
I've seen it when we take them out and we incarcerate them, but they tend to come back, or somebody tends to come up in their place. But if instead of doing that, you change their leadership, you change their influence, then you can change the tenor of the whole neighborhood.
And Doctor, I'll add one more component to that, which I'm the greatest advocate for: family. I take tremendous pride and esteem in being a father. So in that same scenario that you're communicating, and maybe this is a completely different show, we have to talk about the role of the family and the role of fathers in the home, and fathers having a zero victim mindset to teach their children. It's really amazing that the Bible, even though women carry the baby and nurture the baby, the Bible tells fathers to raise your children up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, and don't exasperate them, don't provoke them to wrath. It was God intended for the fathers to be the educator and to define in the home. And so another missing conversation with victim thinking and the challenges that we're seeing in our society is we're not really addressing the role and the importance of fathers in building strong families. Now, the second part of that, when we talk about, just the attitude, the overall attitude of victim thinking, we get to travel the nation and, even internationally quite a bit. I get to meet people from all over America, and I'm amazed at the common denominators of decency, living a good life, a quality life, that most people in America want the exact same thing. And when you talk about those micro pockets, those small areas where you're seeing trouble come from those areas, I think the same thing is happening in our nation with the division, that it's not widespread across the nation. The nation is not as divided as we're being, taught and told that it really is. Most people, I think, have unified around the common denominators: good old fashioned life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My one criticism of Thomas Jefferson, I said he got the order wrong. Instead of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it should be liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and life. I think everything starts with being free. And once you are free, you're now free. You have the liberty for the pursuit of happiness. And as you pursue happiness in life, it creates a life for you. That's the power of zero victim thinking, that any person who is subject to victim thinking, you don't have a life. You're not free. You're not able to pursue your goals, your calling. You lose the dignity of being who God created you to be, to give your best, to be your best, not only for yourself and your family, but for your community. Don't deprive the world of the greatness and the great potential that is inside you because you're living subject to victim thinking. I really want to see a mass liberation take place and see this broken over our nation. I think it'll lead us to a place that we'll all benefit in ways that we've never imagined before.